Today on Locked On Dolphins, we're exploring the upcoming free agency market at the safety position and just what kind of help may be available for the Dolphins in March.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and the NFL draft lead for the 33rd team. I want to give a special shout out and welcome to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. What time is it? It's game time. If I feel like I've got a little extra pep in my step today, it's because I do. Got some. I'm a hashtag no free pub podcast in general, but I do have some Gatorade. The bad thing about traveling for all the All-Star events is I think every single year I've done it, I've gotten sick on the front end or the back end of every trip. And I came home with the flu. So yesterday's show was an uphill climb, but we needed to do it. And it was fitting that it was an offensive line position that we spotlighted with the offensive guards, right? Because adversity is opportunity. And we want more toughness in the trenches. I had to put my own big boy pants on and have some mental fortitude and mental toughness to get through the offensive guard free agency spotlight show. But Gatorade's got me feeling right today. So, well, we're going to go into the secondary and look at safeties and the safety market as a whole. What kind of dollars are spent on top of market players? We're going to look at Jevon Holland and where he fits in this, but then also like where I think you can find starters that are either long-term or short-term answers at the position, depending on what kind of investment you want to make at this position. Perhaps this is a spot where you had time on task with Patrick Morris. You feel really good about it, and you're comfortable with him competing for one of your two spots. So you only feel the pressure to sign one guy with the intent of drafting another. Perhaps Patrick McMorris is destined to be a special teams guy this year, and you need to sign two guys in free agency. Or maybe that spurs your intention to re-sign Jevon Holland. I certainly hope it wouldn't yield you an outcome of re-signing Jordan Poyer and letting Jevon Holland walk. I feel like that would be the worst possible case outcome. But there's all different kinds of possible combinations. That's the exciting thing about a room like the safety room that is such a blank slate for 2025 is you can look at how this defense has been successful elsewhere and what some of the pieces have been and what some of the pieces have not been as far as traits at this position. And you can look across the league and find some players that are really interesting fits, including players that have played in this system and some of the other stops along the league. But first, we have to acknowledge the value of the dollar at this position. This is a tough spot. There's one player in the NFL, Antoine Winfield Jr., who is making in excess of $20 million per season AAV. He signed a 4-year, $84.1 million contract. The next highest safety contract is Derwin James with an average of 19. There are two additional players, Minkah Fitzpatrick and Budda Baker, whose annual average salaries are in excess of $18 million. And then two additional safeties after that, whose annual average salary is in excess of $16 million. It's Jesse Bates at $16.005 and Xavier McKinney, who signed in free agency last year as a 25-year-old safety with the Packers for $16.75. So that's your top of market as far as that's 6 names. And the 7th highest name is Kyle Duggar, who signed a contract last year. That was 14.5. Budda Baker just did his contract recently. So there's been some new money. Antoine Winfield Jr. last year that's kind of changed the top of this market. But the vast majority, unless you're an elite top 6 guy, you're under $14.5 million per season. Why does that dollar amount matter? Because you could put that in the context of A top 10 paid safety in the NFL is getting paid half of what a top paid wide receiver in the NFL is making. Is getting paid half of what some of the top pass rushers in the NFL are making, getting paid half of what some of the top offensive linemen are making for offensive tackles. I mean, that market's really only started offensive tackles to blow up. But between the Penei Sewell contract and the Trent Williams deal, I mean, Tristan Wirfs is at 28. Penei Sewell's at 28. You go to left, and those are right tackles. You go to left tackle, Trent Williams, 27.5. Christian Darrisaw just signed his recently at 26. So you're talking top 10 players at this position at safety are half of your premium positions. And you can get into roster construction ideology and whether it's worth paying players at this position that much or not. But $15 million here, hypothetically, I'm not saying the Dolphins should pay any safety $15 million, but $15 million at this position gets you a different caliber of player than $15 million at offensive tackle or wide receiver. Gabe Davis signed for $13 million per year in Jacksonville on a 3-year deal. Gabe Davis's contract at 13, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, would have been the 9th highest paid safety contract in all football. Think about that. For top 10 paid players. And then there's players like Grant Delpit and Julian Love and Justin Reed, Harrison Smith. You're into the Geno Stones, Donovan Wilsons, Malik Hookers, Juan Thornhills. That you're getting into $7 million per season. Right. So there's a whole conversation about Jevon Holland that has to happen, and we'll do that later in the show as far as like where he fits in this puzzle. But it's important, I think, to note that you're going to be throwing around dollar amounts here that are going to get you to negotiate with almost the entirety of the free agency class. And I think that's an exciting opportunity for the Dolphins because $7 million last year got you Aaron Brewer on an AAV perspective, and it ended up being a home run signing for you. Less than $10 million got you Jordan Brooks. And because it was linebacker is a devalued position. And I think the safety position, when you look at the names that are available, and we're going to get into that next, I think there's an opportunity, whether it is Jevon Holland or it's somebody else, you could pay competitive market value and touch anybody in the class that you want. And it's going to be a chance for you to go out and get a player that has a chance to translate and correlate similarly if you pick the right player to how Jordan Brooks and Aaron Brewer did this past year in free agency. So who's available? We're going to get into that next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. Big game is almost here. There's no better way to make it even more exciting than with PrizePicks, the best place to play daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, PrizePicks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 player projections. And if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw for 1 yard to win. Pair that with one more correct pick and you are cashing out. Check out the promos tab to tail any of the Super Sweet Millie winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of a $1 million promo fund. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. So let's run our game through this free agency market. And the ideology applies the same to this position group as it did at interior offensive line yesterday that we talked about, where I am looking for the intersection of talent and youth. I'm not looking to sign a bunch of 35-year-old players, just like I thought about doing the Should the Dolphins Trade for Cooper Kupp show today. And it had been a really short show because I'd have done the tease. We'd have done the promo video at the beginning. I'd have done the intro with the title sponsor. And I'd have said, no, thanks for watching. And I'd have stopped the video because you're talking about a 32-year-old wide receiver who hasn't played more than 12 games in 4 seasons, who's owed $39 million in cash over the next 2 years. That's the entire polar opposite of everything that this offseason is supposed to be about for sustained success and viability into the future. The only thing that does is appease a short-term itch, especially if you move on from Tyreek Hill. It would not be for me. And boy, oh boy, would that be one heck of a show if they end up doing something like that. So hit subscribe, come back in the event that they do that. But I would certainly hope that's not the tone and the focus of this offseason. It flies in the face of everything I think this offseason needs to be about for this football team. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be active in free agency and target players. Case in point, Andre Sisco, 25-year-old safety from Jacksonville. Talanoa Hufanga, 25-year-old safety from San Francisco. Trayvon Moehrig, 26-year-old safety from Las Vegas. Ardarius Washington, 26-year-old safety from the Ravens, is a restricted free agent, which is a bummer because he was really good when they put him in the lineup in the second half of the year and benched Marcus Williams, who's going to be available. So you might see Ravens and Marcus Williams and your ears might perk up. It would be the wrong Baltimore safety to want. Things turn south there pretty fast for Marcus Williams. Jason Pinnock, 26-year-old safety with the Giants, I think has a pretty high floor as a player. Interesting player. It kind of has developed during his time in the NFL. Jeremy Chin, 27-year-old safety, signed with the Commanders. Would be surprised if they let him hit the market, but if they do, from a hybrid role, second level slot, half field safety, very, very versatile, athletic, big player who can fit the run and tackles well. 27 years old. He played last year in Washington for $4.1 million. That would be an outstanding signing in my mind. Julian Blackmon, 27-year-old safety from the Colts. He re-signed with them for $3.7 last year. I thought he was a player that should have been on the Dolphins' radar last year in free agency instead of Jordan Poyer. Jordan Fuller, 27-year-old safety with the Carolina Panthers. He signed for less than $3.5 million per season last year. Cam Bynum coming off a rookie contract with the Vikings. 27-year-old safety, played 91% of the snaps. High football IQ player from Cal. I can keep going. Like you can get into the Justin Reeds of the world, but he's coming off a contract that paid him $10.5 million per. That Marcus Williams is a 29-year-old safety. It deserves an acknowledgement. I don't think he's the right kind of player to target here. And then you're getting into some older players, whether that be Harrison Smith or Tashawn Gibson or Rodney McLeod or Adrian Colbert, Quandre Diggs, who's coming off of an injury, Justin Simmons, Von Bell at 31 years old, played for minimum last year, John Johnson with the Rams. I've been hoping they'd sign him for 2 seasons. It hasn't happened. The point being, like, you want vets, you want guys off rookie contracts that showcased a lot of potential, you want well-established starters, you want players that you could hope would bring in and potentially be the next Xavier McKinney as a guy who signs in free agency and has a big explosion at his next stop. There is a ton of options at safety. So knowing you can have your hand in any pot at this position with all of these different options, to me, this is a spot I am looking, in my mind, if I'm the Dolphins, to be targeting one of my bigger investments in free agency this offseason. And again, that doesn't mean it has to be $22 million per season or a market reset contract or a top 5 contract at the position. But are any of these players willing to accept what's equivalent to top 12 pay at the position? Because top 12 takes you through Derwin, Buda, Bates, Williams, old contract, Jalen Thompson, Justin Reed, $10.5 million. That is the Jordan Brooks value with $1 million more tacked on. So you're talking a Jordan Brooks equivalent contract. If you told Trayvon Moehrig or Andre Sisco or Jeremy Chin, Cam Bynum, I think would not be in that stratosphere, but now you're getting into 7. Now you're in the Aaron Brewer spending range. There's a lot of options, and I think you can have competitive sell, and it sounds like the Dolphins are going to have Anthony Weaver back, and you're playing in a secondary with Jalen Ramsey, and you're playing in South Florida for all the good old free agent selling points for players coming to South Florida. You could be highly competitive here. And I think it takes all the desperation out of figuring something out with Jevon Holland. Now, is there a world in which you told me Jevon Holland was back at a certain price point and I'd say, okay, I hope he can rebound and be the player that he showcased he was fully capable of being early in his NFL career? Yeah, I think so. Now, is that a dollar amount that I think Jevon Holland is going to jump at the opportunity to sign, especially because the PR that exists out there of how Pro Football Focus graded him as a top 5 free agent because he's 25 and he had good grades for 2 out of his 4 seasons and just had a down year. Like all that stuff goes into free agent negotiations, right? And the youth element here, but this is not the only young player on the market. And if you told me you had to pay $12 million to sign a safety, I don't think Holland would be my top choice to pay $12 million a year to. I'd probably pay, I would definitely pay Trayvon Moehrig 12 before I paid Jevon Holland 12. I think the only other player that would be in that conversation for me, would be Andre Sisco as the other 25-year-old. So that's a 26-year-old free agent from the Raiders and a 25-year-old free agent from Jacksonville. But I think their play warrants being in that conversation and has warranted that more recently. Now you can get into, would you rather do that or would you rather pay Cam Bynum $8 million per season? And that's the whole opportunity cost of the jigsaw puzzle of putting together an offseason plan, which is what we're in the process of doing. And we're about a month away from debuting on the show, which is the full simulated offseason that I have for what I would do. But Jevon Holland's fit into this is where we're going to finish today's episode of Locked On Dolphins. So make sure you guys stick with us. If you're looking for tickets to your next big event, maybe last minute tickets to the big game, whether it's concert, comedy, sports game, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache. But with Gametime Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Gametime Picks, the app does all the hard work for you, curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. The best part, you're covered with Gametime's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund you 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. If you're ready for your next event, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets with lowest prices guaranteed. So Jevon Holland's fit into this probably for me would fall somewhere into the Darnell Savage through Donovan Wilson, Juan Thornhill price point at the safety position, which I fully acknowledge is not going to be a competitive offer for what I think Jevon and his team are going to be able to cultivate for him on the open market. But that's around $7.5 million per season. So I think that's a fair intersection of how Jevon's last 2 seasons in Miami have gone, with players like Donovan Wilson, with players like Juan Thornhill, who are physically talented players and different skill sets, respectively. Can be considered quality starters when they're playing at their best, but don't necessarily have some of the needle-moving plays. Now, I'm sure you could point to names like Julian Love and Kyle Duggar, Grant Delpit. If you were the Holland camp and say, look, these guys are getting 11, 12, 14 and a half, and let's not act like these guys are Ed Reed back there, and they'd have a point. And I think that's why it feels like this chasm exists between the two parties. But again, because you have the depth of the safety market that exists, I don't think you should feel a lot of pressure. And this is not because of the draft class. This is not an area where I feel like Miami should feel the need and urgency to sign multiple players. Now, you can bring back Elijah Campbell on a 1-year, $2 million contract to be another core special teams guy for you. And I think he'd be great in that role, right? And he's played some defensive safety. So you could bring a player like that back. You have Patrick McMorris under contract, who flashed big time in training camp and in the preseason games. And then you have, I think you make one competitive signing. You don't even get into the draft class, which is a great class for needing safeties. I mean, if I hypothetically had a draft board, which I do for the 33rd team, and it's not graded just for the Dolphins, but if I were to look at safeties that I have graded in the top 100, I have 6. So I have another half dozen. I've got more than a half dozen names in free agency that I'm really excited about as potential various degrees of dollars invested. And then I've got another half dozen guys in the draft, from Malachi Starks as a potential first-round pick, or Xavier Watts potentially in the second round as a high-post player, or Nick Eamon-Worry is the supersized like Jeremy Chin out of this year's class, or Andrew Makuba from Texas, or Kevin Winston, who missed the year last year after the second game. He played the first quarter of the second game of the year against Bowling Green, had a knee injury that ended his season. You have some more fringe top 100 type guys like Jonas Sanker from Virginia, Billy Bowman from Oklahoma, who's got great ball skills, a little questionable with the tackling. Maxon Hook from Toledo, Jalen Reed from Penn State. All of this builds to the argument of, if you want Jevon Holland back, I think you make him an offer and you're not afraid if he balks at it. And you put the ball in his court and say, you want to go out and test yourself on the open market. And if the value of the dollar is the most important thing to you at this position, no hard feelings. If you know what you're worth, it's what? It's the Rocky sequel with Stallone, right? Out in the rain on the sidewalk. If you know what you're worth, then go out and get what you're worth. And if that's what you want to do, if you're Jevon Holland, great. This is not a position group that I'm losing sleep over opportunities to find competitive players that can make this a more robust and lively position room in 2025. And man, there was a lot of meat left on the bone. So if you find an instincts guy, if you find an all-encompassing player in free agency, and you want to make him one of your 2 or 3 fringe $10 million plus a year players that you sign in free agency, that I think is probably going to be the appropriate budget, go for it. Do it. Because I think you're going to get a really good player, like potentially to be a quality starter for you and a long-term quality starter for multiple contracts if you want that. And there's not too many position groups across the board where I think there is enough of a surplus and a top of market rate that the Dolphins, with where they're at this offseason, and it's going to continue to get better over the next couple of years, assuming they have the right game plan to go throughout the offseason, to be able to say that about. This is one of those groups. Plan accordingly, act accordingly, and act. Most importantly, act. Identify a talent that fits what you want and go out and get a guy here, because he could be a difference maker player for you. And you didn't have difference makers at safety last year. That's going to do it for us here today on the show. Hope you guys enjoyed. Kyle Krabs, you can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Make it a great rest of your Tuesday. I will be back again tomorrow to preview another position group for free agency, the start of March.